Hello and welcome to this special author interview for FanFiAddict. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, and joining me today is the absolutely brilliantly talented writer, artist, Jendia Gammon. Hello, Jendia. How are you today?
Hi, Frasier. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing awesome, thank you. And I have to say thank you, because when I started doing these interviews for FanFiAddict way back at the start of this year, you were the first person who came and was interviewed by me, and now you're the first person who's returning and is featured as a live guest. So yeah, thank you for doing it. It's great to see you. Since we last spoke, you have released an awesome book, The Inn at the Amethyst Lantern, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So for anybody, there it is, beautiful cover. For anybody who hasn't had a chance to read it yet, just give us a little bit of a flavor of what this book is.
So The Inn at the Amethyst Lantern is my traditionally debuted novel. It is a young adult, but 13 to infinity for anybody over 13, lunar punk science fiction fantasy book. And this book takes place in the future, but it has a villain from our time. And I can read you the blurb. Long after a climate catastrophe, when a utopian future faces an unearthed evil from our present, Jen Lightworth and her friends in the night-living town of Glimmerbite must stop the past from repeating itself by using all their wits and talents and perhaps a bit of magic. So this is a book that is very much like Stranger Things mixed with the Goonies, mixed with Studio Ghibli, or as someone said, was it you, Frasier, that said it's basically the Goonies meets Pitch Black, which was like the most awesome quote. Perfect.
Yeah, that is exactly what it reads like. It's just the perfect blend and mashup of so many different things that you just love, that it's just impossible not to find little sparks of brilliance through the book. It's absolutely great.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you. It makes me happy that you enjoyed it to that degree. I love it.
Oh, it was brilliant. With regard to the mashup, how did that come about? Was that like a conscious thing, or was that just something that happened naturally? Or did you think, no, I want to mix this and this and this and this, and all of these other things as well? Or is that just something that happened when you were writing it?
I think that I knew that the protagonists would be teenagers, and so I thought, well, the obvious things that you would compare teenage adventures with some speculative stuff going on would be the Goonies or, Stranger Things, and maybe a bit of Sabrina, that kind of thing. So I knew that there would be inevitable comparisons there, but I was doing my own thing with it, and I didn't know how it would fall out, because also I was kind of basing it on some of the adventures I had, back in the day, that, I went on all kinds of adventures, did things I wasn't supposed to, went into creepy places, things like that. And it's just kind of filtered through everything in the book. Right. So, and I wanted to lean into this being a future in which we have science, but we also kind of have magic, or at least what the book is sort of saying is magic. Right. So, and that was leaning a bit more mystical than the other properties I have mentioned. So I loved the sort of fairy tale, sort of Oz-like vibe of, being in a very different place that behaves maybe a little bit not so much like where we are now.
Yeah, that is brilliant. And it's so evident that you bring a lot of personal perspective into the book because of the love that you have, or the love that you feel as a reader for the setting and the characters, but also just how it all just feels like it comes from a very real and a very human place, which is fantastic. Just let's start a little bit on the characters. And just by the way, for anybody who's tuning in and who's watching us live, if you have a question for Jendia, just post it in the comments, and we'll try to we'll try to get as many in as we can in between the chat that we're having. So yeah, give us some good questions. But let's start with the characters, Jendia. This is such a brilliant ensemble. Where do you start with like putting all of these things together? Because like, I know I have my favorites. I know you'll have your favorite. But it's such a huge cast of characters. What was it? What were the like? What was that like putting it together?
It was a lot of fun because I had written a short story called Midnight Serenade for Solar Punk magazine that was published early this year. That now serves as the prologue to the book. In that story, it's almost kind of like a futuristic Cinderella story a little bit, where a girl named Mira Celestis wants to go to this ball. She's just a little too young for it. She's got to figure out a way to get into it. And this is in a night living society where it does everything at night because it's too harsh and dangerous during the day to do that. So everything's sort of got this glowing mystical vibe, in their night day. And she wants to go to the glowworm ball in this giant glowing, sphere of events. And so she tries to figure out a way to go, and that involves using a bit of illicit magic. She doesn't realize that that's going to trigger something else later on. And the book opens after that with her cousin, Jen Lightworth, Gentian, and that's the main character of the story. And I wanted them to be distinct from each other, that they would not be just like each other. Jen needed to be maybe a little less confident than Mira. Mira is sort of bald, I'll say brazen. But Jen is more laid back. She just kind of wants to like read and go for hikes and stuff and just do her own thing. But then she's sort of thrust into this role that she never anticipated, and she has to step up and become a leader. And I wanted to explore that with someone with whom that was not ever something they wanted to aspire to. Like Mira is out there wanting to do stuff in the world, and Jen is like, but then she's faced with having to step up. And her brother, Jazz, is Mr. Studious, slightly judgmental older brother. And I know a thing or two about that, having two brothers. And so I just wanted that sort of dynamic, the family, the three of them, that core trio interplaying with each other, and that family dynamic of parents, cousins, but then expanding out in friendship to their group of teen friends, each of whom has a spectacular personality and talent that is, special, and each gets their moment to shine in the book. So I really liked the dynamic of all of that, but I also liked having much older characters. And I won't spoil it, but there are some incredibly old characters in the book, and getting that sort of culture clash interfering with this night living future is kind of an interesting place. And I tapped into some of my high school and middle school years. I went on some adventures in high school, places that were abandoned in East Tennessee, where I grew up, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I just wanted to channel all that into these kids and give them all a chance to step up and be brave in an incredibly unprecedented situation.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't hold anything back from these kids either.
I don't.
And especially,
this is hardcore.
Yeah, especially in terms of like even just the different types of characters that you've got. You said that you wanted them all to be different from one another.
Yeah.
There is such a great balance across it, where they've all got different skills, they've all got different personalities. Was that fun to play with in your head, sort of, juggling all of these different characters against one another?
It always is. I think it's a brand for me to have a broadcast of characters in all my books. And to me, that's easy because that's like my real life. Like I have a broad set of, I have three siblings. I have, Gareth and his three siblings. I have all these wonderful people I've got to know from all over the world, old friends, and, everybody's different. So it's not any harder for me to write different characters because that's what I know. That's what I'm used to. I'm used to, in my family, the four of us, I know we drove my parents crazy, but in a different way, each of us. So we are all four, we're siblings, but we are very distinctly different from each other. You can't look at one of us and say, oh, that's the twin of the other at all. We're just very much different people. So I definitely had life experience to write for these broadcasts of characters. And I love giving everybody a chance to shine. I love giving side characters a moment. And then you just kind of fall in love with that character too, and be like, "Oh, I want more of that." Which I hope I get to tell more stories in this universe because there's a lot I could tell.
Yeah, my favorite was Nyota. I absolutely loved her. Yeah, Will we ever see like a spin-off solo for her, or is that just in my mind like a wish list?
That isn't up to me. You know, this is traditional publishing, and I go where the publisher wants to go, right? In this case, like I will tell the story, but I can't guarantee that, you know. So spin-off stories I don't foresee happening for this particular cast. Sequels, possibly. But prequels, very possibly. Because there's a whole lot to tell about how this world got to where it was and the dynamics of certain characters that got it there.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There is a real dense history, and I love the way that you layer it through the story. I think that's really, really cool. But yeah, in terms of the world, I think that's one of the things that I immediately fell in love with, you know, was the world of the story. Griffkin on the comments has talked about lunarpunk and solarpunk being sort of new to their lingo, but lunarpunk, I know that you've got a real love for sort of nighttime, you know, stories that are set at night, stories that are set on the moon with that kind of atmosphere. What made you want to write the lunarpunk story?
Well, I loved when I first came across it. I thought, you know, I had seen what solar punk was becoming, which was sort of a sustainable future, sunlight, the aesthetics of it being bright yellows, greens, oranges, all of the things related to solar power and, you know, pollinators and all that sort of daytime utopia. Whereas lunar punk flips it, if you'll forgive, upside down. And in this case, it's lunar, it's related to the moon. And you have night living, you have phosphorescence, bioluminescence, glowing tech. But there's also magic, and there's mushrooms, and there's night animals. And so I went hog wild. I went full bore. I invented this entire world, whole cloth. The town of Glimmerbite is in this place, and then the lantern, the lighthouse, the Amethyst Lantern, is on a promontory above there. And so in its shadow is this ancient derelict inn that everybody thinks is shuttered and there's nothing in there, and they're wrong. So there's actually something incredibly important in there that can determine all their futures, or bring an end to things. So, you know, it was just really fun to lean into that nighttime thing, because I was always, growing up in East Tennessee, I would go out at night as a junior astronomer and study the stars and learn about them. And I made an astronomy club for my East Tennessee pals when I was age 10. I even made really dorky newsletters. This was back in the early 1980s, and I talked about exoplanets before we had ever detected one. So I was speculating, you know, about there being exoplanets around, you know, the Alpha Centauri system, and we would have fun talking about that. What did that mean? What does magnitude mean on stars? You know, like, what does it mean, the different colors of stars and their temperature? So I was all about the night sky. I love the moon. My middle name is Dianne, which comes from Diana, the goddess of the moon. And my birthstone is amethyst. So in the Questrison Saga, the diamethyst is this incredibly powerful amethyst-looking stone. And in this book, you have the Amethyst Lantern and the source, which is a power behind it. So I loved leaning into all those different aesthetics and things, but coming from that upbringing of loving geology, night sky, nature. My degree is in ecology and evolutionary biology, so I could speak from that aspect of this world and how you would adapt in a post-climate catastrophe if we began doing night living, which honestly Phoenix and Tucson are already doing night hikes and things like that. So yeah, that's where it was all coming from. But I threw in everything I loved, as well as the things that I think would be awesome or scary.
Yeah, definitely. Is there like a little detail about the world or a little aspect of it that you are like particular, that's like just stands out to you as a fan of lunarpunk, that, you know, is not just writing the story, but is there one that you're really proud of that you think, oh yeah, I'm so happy I came up with that?
Actually, all of it. There isn't one thing I can pick out. You know, I'm obsessed with lighthouses, and the Cape Hatteras, North Carolina lighthouse is basically what the Amethyst Lantern looks like, except it's purple and white and not black and white. And I've got a thing for lighthouses. So I was like, I want a lighthouse on a book one day, and I have it. So I'm very happy about that. But I also, I loved that the biolumin pin, the newspaper of this world, is a husk. You know, it's like a bud, and it's delivered by various animals like possums and foxes to your door, and they're sentient. And somebody's writing this newspaper and nobody knows who it is, but it's basically like a mixture of news and gossip. It's a little bit like in Bridgerton with, you know, the newspaper there that gets all the gossip out, except you don't know who's writing it. And then you got to read it really fast or it'll disintegrate and turn into a kernel and it's gone. And that's another little thing about this world, that you need to read letters and things really fast, because then they go poof, they roll off and they're poof gone. So you got to read fast, and including special invitations that come delivered via giant Luna moths, you know. So I also liked Andraste's place in Moonbow Valley. I wanted that to be a very mystical, otherworldly menagerie oasis, an ecological oasis as much as anything, in this place where everything has adapted to a certain degree. And then she's created this haven that is intensely magical, but you know, still there's some science there. So, and I loved I think one of my favorite things about the book is the juxtaposition of our world and theirs, and getting to see their world a little bit from someone else's perspective. And I would love to explore that a little bit more if given the chance, but I won't spoil that. Just to say that it's just a neat world. I love all the tech around it. I love, you know, I don't want to spoil either. There's an immense creature in the book that I love a lot, and I put a lot into him. And I was like, I want that in my life.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
So cool.
Me too. I
Yeah.
was like, my little one has been watching an awful lot of My Neighbor Totoro, and
Well,
you've got
there
the
you
cat
go.
bus.
Studio
You got the
Ghibli.
cat bus in that, right? And then, but this one that you've created, to me, is like is my it's a much cooler form of transport than even that. I would say it's like, it's if you're thinking along those lines, you will love what Jendia has come up with. But I could tell that you really loved your world, because you were really kind enough to send me some stickers and some swag from the book, and an awful lot of it is connected to the world. Like, you've got some of these, like the creatures, the moth, you've got the mushrooms, you've got the possum, there's loads of really cool aspects to it. And I could just tell that you loved creating it, because it's, as a reader, you just love reading it. Would you, if given the chance to live in a world like that, would you take it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's like, because one of the things I love about the world too is that it is sort of utopian until things go sideways. And there's much more emphasis on, like, let's enjoy ourselves and appreciate each other. Let's play games with our parents at night. You know, let's press pause and look out for each other. And I love that kindness and that looking out and that neighborly, you know, friendship and family vibe in this book. And even though it does get pretty stressful, there is swearing, because you better swear when you're under pressure if you're not real, you know. And then there's some gore, there's body horror, and there's gore. The villain is a true villain. And there's, you know, this world is threatened, and we have to, I like to stepping back and thinking, if I had the choice and the chance to make a better future in the scenario in which this unfolds, this is how it would be. You know, this is the community aspect and the joy and the wonder that I would want in that society.
Yeah, definitely. But despite all of these things that are in it, which might make it sound very much like an adult book, it's very much a YA book, isn't it? It's very much young adult in the way that it reads. What was that like?
Yeah. So I want to address that for a moment, because a lot of times lately, when you say YA, people jump to like a romantasy with people who are basically in their 20s. And that's not what this is. I love that, but that isn't what this is. These are actual young teens. The main character is 14. They have 14, 15, 16, 17 on up to ancient. So, and then, you know, it's very much about figuring out who you are. And when you're a young teen, you're in that mode. You are not crystallized. If you were reading the historic materials books, your demon's not fully formed yet, right? So it's like, you're right there. I will say though, now they're past puberty, so that's not entirely accurate, but but they're still figuring out, who am I? How do I fit in the world? Who am I going to become? Just like we all did at 15, 14, 15, 16, and some of us in our 30s and beyond. Let's be real. But almost 50. Anyway, yeah. So it was like, basically, it's written from the perspective of a 14 girl, and it's for anyone, especially 13 and above. It is not a young kids book, because there is swearing. I have everything listed on Storygraph for, the content warnings, if you want to look it up. And I encourage parents to do that before making the decision of giving to someone younger than 13, because there's a lot of wonder here, but it gets pretty scary, and it gets pretty gory and violent, because the stakes are high when it comes down to, these final battles. So, and I didn't want to sugarcoat that. I mean, God, even the Oz books, and those were supposedly for kids, are pretty gory, and I didn't want to hold back from that at all. I wanted this to be, yes, teens and on, teens to infinity can read this and maybe recognize themselves no matter their age.
Yeah, it's because it's a true coming of age story, and I think anybody who has gone through that experience or is going through that experience is going to relate to the books.
Right.
With regard to writing YA, though, this was your first time breaking away from writing an adult book and writing YA. What did you learn from that experience of writing for a different audience?
Well, it's interesting because I also wrote another YA book immediately after that. I didn't even stop. So, but that one is older teen dragon fantasy and very big adventure. But this one, what I liked was revisiting my memories from that age. I remember very well what it was like to be a young teen growing up in East Tennessee, having adventures with my friends, trying to figure out who I was, trying to stand out from my other 3 siblings all the time. And then 2, I have teens myself. I have 2 teens. Gareth has 2 teens, so there's 4 teens among us. Anyway, that his 2 are in England, my 2 are in LA. So it's just, it's like, I didn't find it challenging. I found it a natural thing. I find it fun to write from perspectives from ageless robots to immortal women who look human, to teens, to, monsters. So it's just, to me, it's another shade on the palette.
Yeah, would you recommend it to somebody who has maybe only ever written for one particular type of audience? Is it a useful thing for a writer to be able to expand your skill set in being able to write for other types of readers, do you think?
All the time. And one of the things I want to point out now is that I highly encourage every writer to write short fiction too, because that's where you can have massive adventures on a small scale, dabble in multiple genres. You don't need to stick to one. You can have a ton of fun. And that's what I've done. I've written now horror short stories, high fantasy, space opera, near future scientific stories. And so the same goes with the book, like read things that are maybe a little bit outside your normal bubble, because your mind will be expanded. And, I like to insert a little slyly some actual science into this stuff, because I have a science background and because I love it, because I think that science is wonder. I don't think it is something cold. I think it is something beautiful and powerful. And, I want to celebrate it. So in terms of it being YA, if you've never read a young adult book, well, presumably if you're not a teen now and you're older than a teen, then you've been through what it's like to be a teen. You will find someone in this book that you will identify with. And if, you're cantankerous and cynical, you'll find someone in here like that too. It's got the spectrum, and I like that it has both sci-fi and fantasy and horror elements, because those are my 3 favorite genres, with all the subgenres beneath to write. So I think it's a lot of fun. This is pure escapist fun. This is the cure to any sort of bitterness, unease, uncertainty about your future. Read this and you will find something that will encourage you. I promise you that.
Yeah, it's a very hopeful book, which is amazing to say that the whole thing happens in the dark of night. But it's very, very hopeful, and I
Yeah.
loved it for that. Um, just you touching on you mentioning you being a scientist. There's also, for anybody who enjoys sci-fi, there's also that aspect to the book, and
Right.
climate change and climate fiction at the minute is kind of becoming a little bit, well, I think speculative fiction is kind of waking up to climate change in a much broader way. Do you think that it's important that that is happening, as a scientist and a writer?
Well, I think it's unavoidable that it's going to seep in whether or not you intend it to. That changes happen over time. Evolution, which is, I'm an ecology and evolutionary biology person, but I also don't rule out mysticism. There is mysticism in this book too. It's not all this cold, hard science. If you think science is cold and hard, you will be pleased. There's mysticism. But there's a moment now that we're in that feels like things are off the tracks. I don't believe that. I think that as long as we can hope, we can come up with solutions. And that's the Venn diagram of everything I represent. It's like, let's take the science, let's take what we know, let's figure out what we don't know, and we're going to have to do it together to all our benefit. And, in the case of this book taking 500 some years in the future, a lot happens in 500 years on Earth. This is a dynamic planet. It won't just, no matter what happens, we won't have just one problem. We won't just have a climate change. We won't just have pandemics. We will have natural disasters. We will have war. We will have a lot of upheaval in society, because that's what happens in the space of a lifetime, but also in the space of several lifetimes, And so this book, I want to remind people that no matter what happens in our future, on our dynamic world, we can figure it out. We've made it this far, and I firmly believe we can keep going.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that that's partly the role of these kinds of stories, of how the way that speculative fiction is entering the conversation of climate change? Is it there to provide us with that hopefulness, as well as waking us up to the very real prospects of where things are heading? But is hope the underlying reason why you think these stories are important?
Well, I think as humans, our basic technology is art and always has been. And we've used it to cope with a difficult world, with a world of suffering since we first evolved. We look around us, we see suffering. And what we need to do is to try to stop suffering, so that we all can thrive. And when it comes to writing something like client fiction and trying to project what am I trying to get across here? I'm not trying to be preachy. I'm just saying that, I want us never to give up. I want us never to become cynical. This book is the opposite of cynicism, and I think that hope offers a doorway to a better future for everybody, no matter what the topic is, no matter if it's climate change or if it's war or if it's, anything like that. So I feel like let's keep the dialogue open, keep the doors open, throw the windows wide open and let the discussion in. And there's going to be viewpoints on all sides. And, let's listen and let's see, like, okay, once you have that all sorted out, like, what do we do? I'm about action. I love thinking all day about stuff, but I'm a bigger fan of enacting things and making them real. So.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that I love that your approach to it is not a preachy one, because it could so easily be with your expertise.
That's boring.
But
Yeah,
but it's very much a case where the themes are prevalent and the themes are present, but you do not get to the end of the book and think, oh, okay, that's been a lecture on climate change.
No.
It's absolute, the way that you've drawn the balance between it is really, really impressive, and it's great to see that. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about as well, with you saying about science not being cold and there being this idea of like this mystical aspect to the book, that is so you and your writing,
Yeah.
because your all of your stories, they all have this same kind of style about them, which is that there are these it's almost like a folk story ish kind of like thing. It's with regard to that style. How long did it take you before you realized, right, this is me, this is me on the page?
I guess it wasn't a conscious thing at first, because I started to notice that I was gravitating towards reading things that gave me hope, because I had started to lose it. I had started to question, like I had a lot of tragedy in a very short period of time, and that'll throw you for a loop, and coping with that, everybody's got their methods of coping. And I just thought a healthier way to deal with it was to be like, well, okay, why don't I just make the better future in these words, and maybe that to me is my escape. But at the same time, I thought, well, God, I have a choice here. And I do write horror too. And I do dive into like really dark stuff. Some of the short stories in Shadow Galaxy they don't end well. They just end with a slammed door. And you're like, oh, well, I'm glad I'm not that person, right? So, and I think it's writing from the perspective of thinking things can always be worse. So how do we make them better, right? That's kind of the dynamic I work within. Never ask. As Ariad says in Heliopause, never ask if things can get worse. You'll only get you're going to get your answer real quick. So, okay, so how do you make things better? That's the choice. That's the choice.
Definitely. I want to talk to you a little bit, because you mentioned the Shadow Galaxy. So this book that we're talking about is the Inn at the Amethyst Lantern.
Right.
In the Shadow Galaxy, you have the stories Blue Lantern Nightfall and The Glove and the Black Lantern. And I wanted to ask you about lanterns, because it seems like you have a love of them, because you keep writing stories about them. It's like, so where does that stem from? Did you realize you were becoming like the Lantern Queen of SFF?
I have some fun kind of origin stories there. So it's not like an accident. Like, oh wait, there's another lantern related title. It's not an accident. And it has nothing to do with Green Lantern. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I never thought of that at all. It's not the same kind of lantern. Okay. It has nothing to do with Green Lantern. I love him, but no. So I love Green Arrow more. You didn't hear that from me though. Anyway, so Lantern, like I've always been kind of obsessed, with lighthouses. I mentioned that. With lighting devices, with lanterns, with actual freaking lanterns, oil lanterns. And I think like when I was a kid, and I grew up in East Tennessee, we had a lot of vicious thunderstorms and we would lose power a lot. And at one point we had some oil lamps and, with the full wick and everything. And I was like, I love stuff like that. I love candles and lanterns and things. But so when I was living in San Diego for 10 years, I would often come up to Dana Point, Laguna Beach, and kind of that coastal road area that was so beautiful, going up Crystal Cove. And I really liked the sort of abandoned sort of Crystal Cove cottage kind of mystery vibe going on there. And I love all things coastal. So, but in Dana Point, there's a set of streets that are each lantern, like blue lantern, like was it sapphire lantern? Anyway, so like they're not quite the same. And like there's like I think one of them is an amber lantern and one is like a ruby lantern or whatever. And they have like these little light bulbs that are the same color. And I don't know the story. I haven't looked into it for why they're named that, but I noticed it every time I would drive and I thought it was fabulous. And I was like, oh yay, we're on the Violet Lantern Street now. So that also played into it. And then so I played with it and I was thinking that of all of them, Blue Lantern Nightfall came first. And I originally was going to connect that, and I still could, to another solar system adventure I'm not going to talk about just in case I do get to write it one day, but that I had started writing. That is YA actually, but I could always change it to adult. And there's that universe, that solar system sci-fi universe is very much where Blue Lantern Nightfall is taking place. So I'm hoping I can write different stories for different ages in that one day if I get the right editor and publisher. So that's a whole nother universe set aside from Questrison Saga from Amethyst Lantern, you know, but that's kind of where that was all coming from. And I have another Lantern story that I'm working on, unrelated really to all of them, although I guess technically there could be an underlying connection somewhere. But yeah, there's with Blue Lantern Nightfall and the Glove and the Black Lantern, it's a difference between sort of space horror and then Earth-based cosmic horror. Because Glove and the Black Lantern is very much a gothic horror with some cosmic horror elements. And that story is connected to a few other stories. And so eventually there will be a book, a full-length book set in that gothic horror universe with some bleed through to some other stuff. So it's all, you know, they all kind of interweave a little bit, not being in the same universe, particularly for most of them, though.
I feel like for your merch and stuff, you should probably have a little lantern that you provide, like a Jendia official one, or like for cons, you should come out with one. That would be absolutely great. It's, yeah, because you're smashing it.
Purple lantern back there that I found at like World Market or something. I was like, oh, that would go good with my book, you know. But yeah, it would be really fun. There's so much merch I could make from all my books. You would not believe. So many accessories and just all kinds of stuff. You go hog wild. Like you think you like Star Wars, when you see my books, I've got it all going on in there. So
yeah. Since the last time that we spoke, when we were talking about the Shadow Galaxy, you are now represented by an agent. Yes. Tell me a little bit about what that's like in terms of, has that changed your approach to what you're writing or what you're writing next, or you know, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so these two books are my traditional debuts this year. This is a short. This is the novel. This is the short story collection with a little bit of poetry. And so these were the first books that I didn't publish myself. This is by Trepidatio, and this is by Android Press. So I got those book deals on the same day, and I thought, well, that's never going to happen again, you know. And I don't know, but so I didn't have an agent at the time, so I just went in kind of cold. Had my lawyer, which I highly recommend people get a contract lawyer, go through and, you know, look through, make sure it was legit, all this kind of stuff. Signed contracts, got the deals, got the books out the door. So after that, I signed with Laura Bennett of Liverpool Literary Agency in England. And I was the first American they'd ever signed, because they normally represent only Northern England writers. So, you know, it was kind of an unprecedented thing for us both. And she represents speculative fiction, particularly sci-fi and fantasy. So it was a good fit. And we came up with, I have an obscenely long list of IP in various stages, over 100 titles. And so given the time, I could write a lot of stuff. And so some of them might end up being short fiction, and that's faster to do and very fun. It's still my IP and I can play with it, you know, it's adaptable, all that stuff. But, and that's another reason I want people to write more short fiction, because movies get built from certain short stories, you know, Stand By Me was, for example, you know. So, and thinking of like looking through that list, we went through the list, we picked 3 of the most likely to be like, okay, this is kind of what editors would probably want right now. So one of them was an epic dragon fantasy. And another is a near future thriller with sci-fi horror elements. And then the third is a campy horror, you know, which I'm about to hit the end on today or tomorrow. So, and I have written all 3 within the past year. So that was a lot of writing. And I wrote a lot of short fiction in the meantime too. And I'm just finally hitting my stride, like finally going for it. I have an agent who understands the way that I write, and the feedback we have is excellent. You know, it's just like we had to pull the dragon book from submission because it was time to put the thriller out. And, you know, we wanted to hold back for better offers for the dragon book, because I think the timing of having a young adult, because it was really kind of crossover. We thought it was adult. We heard back from editors like, we love this, but it's too young adult. We're like, okay, so send it to some young adult editors. They're like, well, it's not young adult enough. And we're like, this is just not the right time for this book for whatever reason. Everybody loves it. There's no negative feedback, you know, it just isn't the right time. And that was heartbreaking, because we both knew it was a great book. And we thought it had, you know, so one day, hopefully somebody buys it and puts it out there, but put the thriller out. And then that's been on submission now 2 months. So that will go through its run. And then this horror book that I just finished, we can talk about that now or later. But
yeah, let's talk about it now, because it sounds awesome.
So this horror book, I will not talk much about it. I'm holding it close to my chest, as also the other 2 books that were on submission. But this one, I think, I'm just going to say it, I think it's my masterpiece. You know, like, I love all my books, and I thought that every book I have written here this year is great. But this one might be the one. It has the most screen potential, that's for sure. When you read it, it is very cinematic. It is purposely so. And it's set in Southern California. So it's like I speak from the experience of living here, you know, and what the culture is like with influencers, with, you know, like Hollywood and all that. So like and it's just one of those things. Like, I loved movies like that growing up. And, you know, when I was a kid, that seemed really far away. And like, here I live in it. I live in it, you know, and it's like, it's kind of surreal sometimes that you feel like you're living in a movie. But this book, though, I just felt so strongly about it that I was like, we need to get it out as soon as possible. I need to be on the phone, maybe with some film agents. You know, that's how this horror book, which has elements of science fiction in it, because of course, but also it's so emotionally gripping. Like, you know, it's just and caustic and funny and, you know, over the top. And that's the one. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am this time. I think that's the one. And, you know, we're gonna go forth accordingly with it. So, and then hopefully somebody loves it and buys my back catalog along with it. Come on, Big Five, come through.
I would love for that to happen. It would, yeah. It would.
My bank account would love it to happen, because, honey, it's dark in there. It's dark.
I have Gareth says that he's read it and it's awesome, and awesome is in capitals. So that is high praise from Gareth. That is awesome. And
okay, he is my husband, but we read each other's work, and so he's read everything else I've written, and I think that, you know, he doesn't shy away from criticism. So, and he's, you know, seeing his reaction as I dole it out chapter by chapter and leave him on a cliffhanger is very fun and kind of mean.
Yeah, that's I like that. I like that a lot. I usually wait until I've completely finished the book before I share it with my wife. But I might try that next time and see how much he's biting her nails in between chapters. Let's get a good gauge of it.
It's been really rewarding to see.
Yeah, and it's just great as well, you know, that you've got somebody who understands story and who understands all of these things to be able to talk to about a book as you're writing it. Is that lovely to have?
Oh my God, I don't know how I coped before. I would have lost my absolute mind if I had not been with Gareth on submission, because let me tell you, being on submission with a book to publishers, nothing prepares you for the stress and the anxiety and, honestly, sometimes the depression of dealing with it. I wrote a Substack article, you know, about submission heartbreak. And I think everybody should read that, because you need to understand that we don't all get that, everybody's throwing multiple deals at the book at the same time thing. Most of us will never see that. The reality is that this takes time, and you may never get that book published, you know, traditionally. And my goal is to do that. You know, like, I want to be traditionally published. I published a 4-book space opera series myself. I put in the money for the cover, 2 editors, design. You know, I did all the promotion myself. It's exhausting and it's expensive, and the money should flow to the author, not out. That's why I'm in traditional publishing. That's why I have an agent. That's the goal. I get fed, she gets fed, you know, like, we're all in it together. And then if I get the right editor and one who loves the style of my writing, hopefully we have a partnership and I can crank out whatever I come up with. If that editor loves what I write, you know, then I get not total free reign, but, you know, a decent license to just create and make some money for once, which I very much need and look forward to doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That gets me thinking about sort of, you as an artist and you as a writer, about sort of the measure of success, because you've said that you think this next book that you're about to finish is your masterpiece, and to me as an artist, I think that is a great thing to have, that confidence, and you think, yeah, that's a success. I've created something I'm really proud of. But then there's also, with the industry, there's this other gauge that people are measuring your success by, and it's where do you fall on that, as to how we as artists are supposed to sort of reconcile those two, so what to you is like the truest version of success when it comes to writing?
Honestly, first you have to think about, why are you writing? Like, if you're writing because it's oxygen, which I do, it is, always has been. At some point, though, you need to figure out, if you want your books out in the world, there's a part of letting go. And that is also true for a piece of art. I'm also an artist. There's a point with the art that you stop. You could keep tinkering with it forever and ever, which could destroy it physically eventually, if it were, physical art. Or, it just becomes, something that was not really your original vision. Sometimes, with traditional publishing, this is a business. And even if it's indie publishing, it's still a business. You're still writing and selling books. Okay. And then with a traditional publisher, they know what will sell most of the time and what won't. Sometimes there's a breakthrough hit nobody anticipated. That's kind of rare, really. But you have to kind of go with the pros if you want your books in the most hands possible. And if that isn't your priority, and you don't care how many people read it, self-publishing is always an option. It's just that it may not get to everybody, and it's really hard to promote stuff like that. You don't have that big machine of publishing behind you, with several people working to get that book in the readers, hands or ears or whatever. So it's, so like the predefined box, like Grifkin says in the comments, it can drive you insane. Like I was like, should I just step away from this? Like, I'm writing these really good books and they have cross genre dabbles or whatever, but like, do I need to be a cookie cutter? Do I need to be the clone of some author who got, a 7-figure book deal? I don't want to be, that's not why I'm writing. But I do also need to trust the process if I want my books in as many readers' hands, ears, brains as possible, so there's a little bit of letting that go, that control. And I'm a control freak. So that, for me to let this go, it's hard. It's hard, but I'm not an agent. I'm not an editor. I'm not a publisher. I need to trust that the people who are making books know what they're doing. And even though sometimes it seems like they don't. And publishing has been through a real roller coaster ride the past few years. And everybody says that this year. And it's not just me. It's not just my age. It's like everybody, what's going on? Well, we got to figure that out. And let's hope that 2024 stabilizes. There's been a lot of upheaval. So.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of upheaval when it comes to social media as well, this year, which is, and I know that you are amazing on social media. You're an absolute pleasure to follow on all platforms.
Thank you. All of them. So many of them. Or every day.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about sort of like, how is that impacting your writer's life? Because you've written so much this year, but also you've had to cope with all of these extra platforms of setting up a profile here and a profile there, and is it affected your output as well?
It's affected my rageometer, which is really often. So because Twitter, what was Twitter, and is no more the same, and never will be again, under the curtains, certain subjects. I'm not going to mention any names, but it used to be a powerful tool for writers, agents, publishers. We all got a lot of connections there. It's really broken down. Links that you put there that nobody sees, they get shoved down in the algorithm. So branching out is absolutely essential. Grab your handle on any new thing that pops up, just in case one of them takes off. So I have invested a lot more time in things that I already knew were working. Instagram, starting a little bit in TikTok. But I've jumped on to Threads and Blue Sky. Threads has mushroomed in the past month into quite a magnificent writing and reading community. So I highly recommend getting a Threads account. Blue Sky is very walled garden, and I don't like that. It's a lot of fun. People have fun there. The memes are fire. That's not what it's about. You know, publishing is a business. So go where the businesses are going. And, you know, but connection wise and making writer friends, go anywhere and everywhere. Go in person, go online, go make those friendships, because God, we're all going through it together. And like, you know, Grifkin, what we were saying earlier about being married to Gareth, I would have lost my mind had I not been married to somebody who'd already been through the submission process and had, you know, has multiple book deals under his belt. And now he's on submission again. And we're kind of in the weeds together, and we can talk to each other. Whereas we might not be able to talk to most people because we kind of can't NDA stuff, right? Cone of silence. There's some things that you just can't talk about until deals are signed. And so that's life. And, you know, in writing and in Hollywood, it's like I always say, like the Richard Marx song, don't mean nothing till you sign it on the dotted line. Let me tell you, if you read that Substack post of mine about submission heartbreak, you're going to read between the lines. Something went down and it was bad. It was so bad. So, and now I don't trust a thing till that it's signed, sealed, and delivered like a song. So
I love how practical.
Deals. Don't do the handshake deals. Get it on writing.
Yeah. Get it in writing. Yeah, I love how practical this advice is for authors that are stepping into this world, because so much of it, like when we talked about earlier, so much of what you're writing is rooted in passion, you know, and the passion for the stories that you have and all of these kinds of things. And I think so many writers have the passion for writing, but are completely new to the industry side of things. And it's just so great to have that experience and for us to share that with anybody who's listening or anybody who watches this, who's new to writing. Yeah, it's a really, really good thing to be equipped with, you know, that your passion is important, but it, you know, the business is also important to learn about as well.
Right. And that's my approach, not just to writing fiction, but to not just to telling stories, but about life and about career. And, you know, the idea that I don't want someone to suffer like I did. I don't want people to wander in the darkness and wonder what is going on. What is this? Who would invent this industry like this? It's so impractical. Honestly, science is very similar, just a different flavor. Same thing. And so my goal then is to be like, I don't want you to go through this. I don't want you to feel like you're alone. Read what Gareth and I write in our Substacks, because we're writing from experience, heartbreak, anger, but also in the interest of you all not having to suffer in silence, to feel like you're unheard, you know, because I'm not making a living on this yet. Okay, I got my science writing gig, hours / there. Thanks, AI. So like, you know, it's like we're trying to figure this out. But what I don't want is to be an island in which I can't at least say, look, you know, there's a way off of this, you know, and the way is to talk about it and to let people know what the experiences are really like, that it isn't a fairy tale, that we don't just go out and get a book deal. We're not well off, you know, that though the reason that stuff makes the news is because it is so rare. Think about that, you know, like it would be great.
Definitely.
Sure. I mean, would I turn down a 7-figure deal? No, because I've got debt. I got kids. You know, I want my husband to live in the States with me, you know, but at the same time, I also write because I love to write. I want to share stories. I want to hear your stories. Everybody needs to write their stories to get them out in the world. So that's where I'm coming from. It's just being like exuberance, passion. Let's go. Let's get it done. I'm an action person. And I want everybody to feel supported. Read our advice columns and just run with it. Run. I mean, Garrett's written a whole book about writing. Literally, it's the title. You know, so it's a good book. And you know, if I ever get approved to write one, I will put my own spin on how this process goes and what you can do to cope. And I think that's something that doesn't get recommended enough. It's like, okay, we know these things happen and they are not great. So what do you do to deal with it? So that's kind of where I'm trying to be helpful and offer ideas. not just from the beginning. Like I have a post on my Substack, a blank page is a universe. Start there, and then just on through the whole process, through submission, through everything else. So,
but the sense of community that exists among writers is such a wonderful thing for about coping, because we can all share with one another.
right.
And I think that's something that I particularly love about both yours and Gareth's books as well, is that you've got this ensemble, and it feels like a community, and it feels like friends together who are doing this thing. And and I think that is very much a reflective of your passion for storytelling is present in the types of stories that you write as well, and because it all feeds into it. So for any writer out there, talking about the Inn at the Amethyst Lantern, you're going to find things that you resonate with in the book, because that's what it's all about. It's the teamwork that we all have with one another is a feature of it. So yeah, I love that, and I love how much passion you bring to everything, Jendia. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you, because you're always so helpful, and you just bring everything, and I love it. So what are you working on next?
Well, so once I hit send on this horror book, I shift gears. Now, this is where traditional publishing gets really interesting, and the question marks start to come in. Okay, what's next? So my agent and I have a plan, but it can change. It might need to change. The plan is for me to write a space opera, a rather sexy one, starting in the new year. But a couple of things can happen that will derail that plan, or at least postpone it. If we get an offer for the thriller that's on sub now, and we go with the offer or whatever, and that editor says, what else you got? Then we need to have a discussion with that editor and say, okay, well, here's what I've got. Here's what I could do. And if the editor feels strongly that I should continue on something else, then we have to listen to that, because they'll get right of first refusal. That's the way it is. So again, I have that huge list of IP. I'm coming up with stories like bubbles in champagne. So I can pivot on a dime. That's part of science writing. Very much helped me with that and helps me write faster. So in case anybody's wondering where that came from, the journalism side is very helpful. So if nothing happens, because this thing could be on submission till April, okay? We don't know. It could go down to the wire. And then there's the horror book in the queue, ready to rock and roll, right? Get out. So, and I very much feel like that has to get out, has to. So we just wait and see at this point. But I will move forward for now with the presumption that I'll be writing on the space opera. And I can say it does take place in the same universe, but it's a slightly different time than the Questrison Saga.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so also, cool.
Okay, but nobody in that saga that you've met yet. Maybe I'll throw a couple, but there's people in here, and there's people in the other short stories I put out this year in anthologies, like in Rhapsody of the Spheres, as Jendia Gammon. I have Opal World Frolic in that anthology. That character is going to be in it. I have the anthology called Red Dwarfs Make the Best Homes, which is limited edition. You just can't get it very easily. And the character in that's going to be in it. And then there's a character in here, Overdue in Deep Space, the space library story. They're in it. But the main character and their enemies to lovers counterpart are brand new to everyone, but the universe, I will be exploring a lot of fun elements like the Fifth Element and Far Escape and all those kind of flavors, things that you love about the Questrison Saga, but maybe a slightly seedier vibe, a little more noir, a little more, underbelly of the stuff. So, but that's all my IP, and I can do anything I want with it. So I'm just going to run with it. And, while some of the characters in the Questrison Saga are looking the other way, there's a lot of other stuff happening over here. So
that's really exciting to hear. I love the space library story. I love the sound of all of that. That sounds absolutely great. And I hope you get to write it, because it sounds brilliant. And what a fantastic showcase of your writing sort of skill set. The fact that this year you've gone fantasy, thriller, horror, and then space opera. It's what a brilliant showcase for your writing and your imagination. I love it.
Well, and then all of that stuff is in the Shadow Galaxy in smaller form. I write in there, in here there's fantasy, science fiction, horror, and magical realism and Appalachian stories from East Tennessee. So this is a good sampler, and this is my newest book. So yeah, help me write more books and spread the word. So
yes, everybody, yes, we need it.
Sequels. Yeah,
we need more Jendia Gammon stories in the world. Thank you so much for joining me, Jendia, and for doing this live interview. It's been wonderful. Can you just tell everybody, I mean, everybody who doesn't already know how to connect with you or to get in touch, what's your best way of doing that?
I will put in the chat, in the comments, my website, and I'll go ahead and make it the book page so that you can see everything under both my pen names, Dianne Dotson and Jendia Gammon. And then my socials are on the main website, but find me under, it didn't post. Okay, I don't know why, but
we'll post it in the comments. Don't worry, it'll get there somehow.
At Jendia Gammon is my username on most platforms. On TikTok, it is at Jendia Gammon Author, all one word. So you know, but that's all linked. I also have a link tree that has all of that stuff. So yeah, just find me out there. I'm on Threads a lot, Instagram a lot, Twitter/X not as much anymore. Kind of mothballing it. Blue Sky, I'm there some, you know, and then we'll see what comes down the line. But I'm encouraged by where Threads is going, and very hopeful that it'll continue to be a good place. So, but yeah, find me out there. I'm there. I love to post updates. Sometimes I cross post, but sometimes each platform I do something a little different. So keep you
every picture that you post out there of food, just to give everybody like a spoiler warning, it will make you hungry. It's like,
that's kind of a brand for me too. I could go
and
then also my Substack, I highly recommend, and I really, really want people to sign up. jendiagammon.substack.com. It isn't just writing advice. I'm sharing all kinds of stuff there. I'm sharing other writers and artists' creative rituals. I'm sharing things about a special feature about the Questrison Saga. I'm going to go through each book and all the characters, talk about them. And I talk about, you know, life, the universe, and everything, as the saying goes. So please sign up for my Substack.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Jendia, and all of the best with what comes next for you as well. And congratulations again on the Inn at the Amethyst Lantern. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, go get it. It's so much fun. Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody for being here.